Hi there, and welcome to Unfiltered Solopreneur, the podcast where we share real, unvarnished stories of people who dared to break free from the corporate grind. I'm your host, Nikhil, and I'm passionate about helping solopreneurs like you turn their dreams into reality. He didn't start with a niche or lead magnet, he started with a question: what if business could feel like healing? In this episode, Jonathon Carrington shares his journey from nonprofit burnout to therapist to business strategist who bridges mental health with business systems. We talk about money trauma, the three P's: perfectionism, procrastination, people pleasing, and why your systems need to be as strong as your story. If you're tired of merely surviving and ready to design a life that truly reflects who you are, this conversation is for you. I'll see you on the other side. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm your host, Nikhil Vaish, founder and CEO of Boost Solo. My guest today is a therapist turned business strategist who helps small businesses and entrepreneurs align their inner workings with their outer image, blending mindset, money, and systems to make sure your operational reality matches your marketing facade. Jonathon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nikhil. Glad to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure, and I'm excited for our conversation. So, as
Yes.
most people know by now, I like to sort of dive right in. So, now you
Yes.
mentioned to me on our pre-call that you had always craved autonomy, right? So, was there a moment in your nonprofit journey, your earlier nonprofit journey, when you sort of realized and thought to yourself, "I've got to make a change. I can't keep doing things this way"?
hmm Yeah, and thank you for that question to start us out. And for those who are listening, before I became a therapist, I was in the nonprofit space, and my degree is in the arts. I have an arts background, and that kind of shifted me into the nonprofit space where I started out my career in nonprofit fundraising and development, where I was at the profit center of the organization and bringing in the money and building programs. And I was in a variety of different roles, right? Um, and I was just doing the work. I mean, I'm very talented. I know that about myself. I'm very creative. I'm people would always say back then I was a master of all trades and didn't really have like a set thing that I was really good at. I could do pretty much anything. And so um being that I was kind of like tug and pulled in different spaces and different roles, I felt myself being a bit disconnected from what I was doing and how I was showing up and how much impact that I was making. And so I was burnt out. And I was also going through some personal issues, and that kind of landed me in the psychological mental health space because in that space, I began to kind of notice like how much I was giving to work, and I was working so much. And in that transition to becoming a therapist, I was beginning to reclaim my own story and helping other people to reclaim theirs. And so, but even with that, over time, I started noticing a pattern. Many of the people that I worked with, especially in my community, the Black community, the BIPOC, underrepresented communities, and the people that I was serving were just not struggling emotionally. They were struggling financially. And I think it goes back to that tie to the work that I was doing. It was a lot of people who look like me in that space, very ambitious, very kind of energetic, high energy, growth oriented, high achieving, but in survival mode, right? And
Right.
so, to your question about autonomy, it was like there was a breaking point where I had to make a choice to continue to live in this rat race where you're in survival mode and you're just kind of doing all these things, but you're not making any money doing it, to making different choices where you were living life on your terms, living life in a more aligned, more centered way, where you were getting your needs met, but also being able to show up more fully for the people that you're serving. And so in that moment, that was when I began to kind of understand like, it's about alignment. It's about, being autonomous in choosing and deciding what how you want to spend your time and energy,
Yeah.
so that you can be of good use to yourself and others. So that's kind of what happened for me. That
Yeah,
makes
no, that's
sense.
very interesting, and it's such a it's a story that gets repeated so often, right? We have a very unhealthy relationship with the corporate world, I think, and that maybe that's gotten worse over time. But
Oh, yeah.
to the point, and I think most of the time we sort of, even my last guest when I was talking to, I mean, we just ignore the small signals, right? That
Yeah.
even our body's telling us, that our mind might be telling us, because we just think that's the way it is. You know, you got a job, you get a paycheck, you hate it, but you got to do it, and it's
Gotta
not
do it.
the way it is, right? So it's interesting that it was sort of your personal experience and burnout that led you to make the pivot. It sounded like, right? Which, is true for a lot of people. We don't do it earlier, right? Until we have to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then especially if right, you're right about that's not sustainable, and especially if you're getting sick.
Yeah,
And not just like it's not like a mental or emotional, it's like you're physically getting sick. Like and I began to kind of start paying attention. This is why I kind of got into the healthcare and like focusing on health, because it was getting bad. It was getting to the point where I was just up all night and not going to bed, and I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't really That was not part of my life. I was just working all the time. So yeah, so I had to make some different choices. And so in this career path has allowed me to be a little bit more autonomous and
yeah,
making different choices and more choices that are more on my terms versus having to be forced or feel like I'm forced into doing work every single day and no one's caring about how I'm doing or how I'm feeling.
yeah. No,
So,
no, I hear you, and as I said, a, it's a common story, right? Sadly,
yeah,
that the
yeah,
wake up calls are not always pretty, but but
exactly.
you have to make the pivot. Actually, that I want to talk a little bit about your pivot also, because
Sure.
you made a pretty significant pivot, right? Going back and getting a master's degree in counseling. So, can you tell me a little bit about what scared you about starting over and what helped you push through?
Oh, wow. What scared me about starting over? You know what? I'll say this to this podcast is that I have to say I had no background in psychology yet before I became a therapist. None.
Wow. Yeah.
I didn't study that in school. I maybe take one class, took like an intro to psych class in my undergrad, but it took me, sometimes in life, you have to kind of do a do-over, and it took me about 4 years to finish my master's degree when in some respects it takes about like 2.5 years, and I started um, my master's program in my early 30s, so I didn't start it right after college, and so for me it was a definitely a drastic mindset shift in terms
Yeah.
of what we were studying and what we had to kind of uh, think about. My worldview had to change, my life had to change, the lifestyle changed, and so for me, it was not so much of a fear. It was so much of a I have to go deeper than just the external. I had to go in. I had to go inward more, which was bringing up a lot of not just professional stuff, but also personal stuff. Because when you're studying to become a therapist, all of your stuff is coming out. It's not just you're going there to get your degree. You're
Right.
learning about everything. Um, your thoughts, your emotions, your perceptions, your worldview, formulating your orientation, the way you see things, everything is shifting. So I went from the right side of my brain, which is more of the creative side, to the left brain, the more analytical, and also just using both sides of the brain in ways that I hadn't. There was That was just not the way I was trained in undergraduate education. It was very much different. So it was a transformation. It was a transformational shift for me. And it
Hmm.
was difficult in the beginning. It was very challenging until I was able to kind of figure it out because I had to pass. I mean, I had to get through grad school like somehow. So, but it took some work. So
Yeah, I'm sure. And so, was part of your the experience that you went through? Did that help you sort of get pushed through, like you said? I mean, because it's a pretty major shift you made, right?
yeah. I mean, um, I think, yeah. I mean, when I was going through it, I was just like, yeah, this is what I've always wanted to. This is where I've needed to be. I needed to be in this lane, but
Yeah,
I got that maybe after my first year of being in grad school. That I was like, oh, this is where I needed to be. That first year was just rough, because I mean, I actually applied for a different school, the school that I didn't go to, and I didn't get in because they didn't understand why I was shifting out of what I was doing to psychology. I had to make that case. Um, I didn't even understand. I didn't even understand what I was making, why I was making the shift. I was just like, you know, this is where I needed to be, but I don't know how I'm going to do it. So yeah, and yeah, but there was a lot of different things that were going on around that time that kind of let me know that this is going to be the path,
yeah.
right?
No, and also something you said earlier really struck me. Right, we sort of think we don't really. I don't think we think about this as deeply as we should. Which is, a lot of people have told me over the years that you cannot help anybody if you're not helping yourself first, right?
Yeah,
And we just never pay attention to that. It's like, yeah, it's something mom or grandma or somebody said, right? Which
yeah,
and that becomes much truer on the solopreneur journey, which we'll talk about more.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. It's very important for you to take care of yourself and help yourself
yeah,
first. Yeah. So
and we all have to learn that lesson at some point in our journey, I think, because
yeah, we do. And it's a hard, sometimes it's a hard lesson, especially if you have never, you weren't really be a little bit transparent. If you were never raised to learn that, like how to, nurture yourself and take care of yourself and, express your needs, that wasn't part of my childhood. So to become an adult and having to, you're, entering into a space where life is lifing and catching up with you. And then you're now having to be in that position to take care of yourself. Yeah, it, it gets real. So yeah. But
yeah,
anyways,
I'm from India. Even in the East, we don't. We those are not things we're taught. We're like,
see, there you go. So
keep your head
yeah.
down, work. Don't ask for a
Yes,
raise, don't ask for a promotion.
that
It'll
part.
come. Just do your work, do it with integrity, and everything will follow. And the world changed.
Exactly. Yeah, it's such a huge cultural expectation. And I think that's cross cultural because you're saying in India, and it's like that's, and even in the African American community, is very much that. It's very much you just work, don't let them see you sweat, just keep going and keep pushing, keep striving. And that was it. So that's all I knew. So,
Yeah. But anyway, I'm glad we both figured it out. So
yes, absolutely.
let me ask you, what expectations did you have when you launched your solo business, and what has the reality been like? Tell us a little bit about that.
The expectation was for me to graduate and to be supported in my identity, my professional identity, but that was not the reality. Um, and so for me, it was more of I don't think that I don't think the reality is that I can only support myself. I know what is best for me and what I
Hmm.
value and what I understand and how I understand things. But I think I expected that I was going to find the people and the places and we're going to all work together and help each other out. And I had these Pollyanna ideas, Nikhil, like about the field of therapy and mental health and psychology that were just not realistic. They were rooted in things maybe I saw on TV or just
Right.
just like how people are, in the movies and stuff. And I was like, no, that's not how it is in real life. Um, so I it was pretty lonely. It was a bit like when I those first couple of years was lonely because I was in a space where I was in spaces where I wasn't really fully being supported the way I needed to be supported as a clinician, as a therapist, as an upcoming therapist. And even with some of the supervisors that I had was just, some of them were okay, but I don't think that they understand the type of work that I wanted to do. And so I think a lot of younger clinicians are going through that right now with just, maybe they feel misunderstood, or they feel like, maybe they don't fit into the field, or maybe what they're doing is not, or maybe they're the black sheep therapist and they're like, you know, their specialty or their experience, their lived experiences just does not match up to the traditional path of therapy. And I feel like I was part of that journey. And so I think that, just to answer your question, those are some of the things, expectation versus reality of like, fitting in and belonging, and how my identity would translate. That was pretty rough in the beginning for me.
That was before your solo journey, though. It sounds like, right? You
Well,
were
yeah, I mean,
working
it
from.
was before the soul journey, and it was during the soul journey as well.
Okay, okay, both.
Yeah,
Got it. Okay, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no, I hear you. It is a lonely path, and you kind of and I want to come back and talk about community and tribe, as we
yeah.
talked about that. I want to touch on that in a few minutes, but I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your brand, right, and building your brand. So you've developed a pretty fascinating niche that combines mental health and business systems, right? So
Yeah.
how did you discover this was your unique value proposition? And tell me what's been the hardest part of communicating that or explaining that to people.
Um, you know, well, I think the pivot for me started this year.
Yeah,
But I mean, I started, so it's 2021 until now. So I I derive a lot of like my understanding of my identity, brand identity, from the conversations that I have with clients. And most of the clients have that I work with are, I initially started out with working with like trauma survivors, or people who have experienced trauma and that kind of thing, and anxiety and those issues. And um but a lot of the conversations I've been having recently have been people who have been carrying a lot of shame and fear from jobs that they've been in, burning out, being underpaid, never being taught how to manage money, having money be an issue in relationships, a lot of financial shame, a lot of financial anxiety, a lot of internalized beliefs and ideas around money and scarcity mindset being formed, in terms of how people think about money and how people navigate around money, struggling about money. So, and especially right now with what's going on in the climate, money is a particular sensitive, is a topic that people are talking about because of the way that um, people are losing jobs, and people are just going through a lot of hardship when it comes to money. And
right.
so, and then what I'm realizing is that people who are in these, high level positions, and whether it be a professional or an entrepreneur or a business owner, there are people who will struggle with money because there is lack of literacy around it. There is just conversations that have never been had around it in terms of one's relationship with money, mindset around money. And so I decided to pivot and move into a space where I could help people deal with their money challenges in a way that is more holistic in scope, not just like the budgeting and saving and investing, but an inside out job where we address, the emotional blocks, where we kind of talk about what is going on with like your story with money, and you know um what is your understanding of your sense of self-worth and your value, how does that interact with your understanding of how you um your fees, and just even like salary and compensation, like really having those deeper conversations
Hmm.
so that we can really kind of move out of those spaces and become more realistic about, you know, getting back on track with funding. So that's kind of where it started, was just conversations with clients, and where that is taking me, moving away from, anxiety and depression and more clinical stuff to moving into more things that are more holistic in scope, you know,
Right.
money being one of those areas. So that's kind of how it started.
And then you evolved it to attach it to systems too, right? It's from what I understand. So there's
Yeah, and
the
the
mindset,
systemic,
yeah,
yes,
and then putting
mhm,
systems in place. Yeah.
putting systems in place, and this is kind of bringing some of my background. So we talked earlier about me, but working in the nonprofit sector, and I was a systems builder, and so, but that's more of an external system. But like, there's internal systems in terms of what systems and strategies are you creating, and so part of me working with the business owner and the entrepreneur is how to become fundable,
Hmm.
right? How do you get ready for funding? How do you, if you're a growth oriented business owner or entrepreneur, how are you creating the systems to get funding and to get to that particular goal? And so part of being fundable is about having the credit, having the financial systems, having the legal structures, having those things in place so that the investor and the lender that's looking at your profile, they can see you as a good risk to take.
Right.
And as a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners are very idealistic and very passionate and very ambitious, but there is no back end financial foundation at all.
Right.
And I'm not speaking of all, I'm not making a generalization, but I'm just saying, all of that excitement and all that energy is not met with a foundation or a system or a structure behind. And so it's an understandable reaction for there to be a denial of a loan or an investment or struggling to a scale, or they hit burnout again because they got that rejection in their business, and then it's like that hits their ego. And so again, that's a mindset, that's a systems, that's a whole thing there. And so part of what I want to do, or what I've been doing, is helping them to get ready, helping them to get their stuff together and get organized, and you know operating in that same position that I was in when I was working in the nonprofit sector as a support role, where maybe it's about getting your entity structuring together with the LLC or a trust, or helping. I'm working alongside other practitioners in the financial space to do this. So I am in this kind of uh, auxiliary role to
Hmm.
help them to navigate all these different people, whether it's like, let's talk about maybe your budget, or let's talk about confidence levels around money or pricing or goals. Let's talk about, maybe you do need to speak to a fractional consultant or a
Right.
CPA, whoever,
Yeah.
but it's helping people to structure their finances in a way to help them to, yes, if you have that dream and the passion and that drive, but have a strategy, have a system, have
Yeah.
a structure in place so you can get there. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. In fact, what came into my mind, the image was in on movie sets. You have beautiful facades, right? And there's
yeah,
nothing behind it. So it's like,
nothing.
yeah, just
Yes.
yeah. And so you're putting the scaffolding, you're creating the structure because you can do really well on the front end. Like you said, you can have a brilliant brand, have clients coming in, but you
Right.
can't really grow if you don't have that foundation and the systems in place to allow you to scale or to go beyond just as you said. Otherwise you'll just burn out and you can't be operating from a spreadsheet when you have 50 or 100 clients. So yeah.
Exactly. And Nikhil, I've always been, so so for the audience, my degree was in theater administration. So my undergrad is, I've always been an administrative or support role, and I'm comfortable at that place, right? In
Yeah.
my orientation, and that's kind of where I come into play is, you know, and I've worked with CEOs and creative people and artistic people, because people who have all this creative energy don't have a lot of business sense. And I'm
Right.
not, like I said, I'm not
Yeah.
coming for those folks on this podcast, but I'm just saying, you know, they need help and they need support. And so a lot of that's where I'm coming at it from, and that energy. So, um, and I could take those skills and those expertise and put all of this stuff together to help people, you know?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and that actually leads me nicely to my next question, which was, so you talked about this ecosystem you're creating, right? A referral based
yes.
ecosystem, because
Mhm.
obviously you understand, you'll go in, sort of assess what are the needs, and then you'll bring in other experts, right? So how do you, and that requires a fair amount of relationship building, right? Relationship investment. So how do you identify potential partners are worth your time? And are there any signs that
Oh,
you see in terms of maybe this is not a right fit for your network? How do you gauge that?
yes, yes, such a great question. And you're right. So I have a multi-tiered ecosystem that I have been forming, and I was doing this even before I became a therapist. I've always been a connector, a community builder, a relationship builder. Um, but for this particular project, I have been networking on a platform that we met on, which was Alignable,
Yeah.
and I've been having a lot of conversations with different types of people, different from different walks of life. And for me, some of the signs that I look for is that, do you have a teacher's heart? Do you have a coachable, like a coach's heart? Because you're dealing with business owners and entrepreneurs who have to make countless decisions, and they have so much to think about when it comes to business development and that. And so, are you leading from a place of teaching and coachable, or are you leading from a place of transactional, quick gain, fast? That don't work for my network. And I've come across some people that operate like that, and more power to those. If anyone is like that, I'm not shaming you, but that's just not the way that I practice. That's not. I'm a relationship person. I'm a person about energy and vibe. And do can I trust you with someone else without me being present in that conversation? Can I trust you with referring you to someone else that I know? Can I trust that that conversation will go well, and you won't try to like go and be underhanded or be very self oriented in that way to meet your needs, whether it be via commission or selling something? I don't work like that. I work with people who are about long term relationships, because I'm in it for the long game. Because we're dealing with people, we're dealing with people who have problems, business folks who have problems, and they also want relational type folks. And so those are some of the things. And I also think like something else, like, can you listen? Like, are you a listener? Like,
Right.
some
Yeah.
people like to do a lot of talking, to talking at people, not talking to them. And so I'm also kind of paying attention to people who listen, um, and that are not just always talking all the time to people who, and it's because it's not about you. You are a service provider. So you have to meet the client where they are and listen. And so fortunately, I've been able to meet some very great people that I trust them so much. And I appreciate and respect the work that they do. And it's amazing. It's been amazing, in terms of referring people now. Like, I got a solid good group of people that I know that I can rely on for different areas, and they're at the top of their game. And and I could just say, "Hey, talk to this person about this and that," and I know that that referral partner got it. Like, I don't have to worry about it. So I think this is just some of the stuff that I would say in terms of when I'm in my ecosystem building pursuits, some of the things that I'm looking for. But I am a gatekeeper. I am gatekeeping. I know that might sound like a negative thing, but I am gatekeeping because I want to make sure that the relationships that I'm forming are quality over
Yeah.
quantity. You
And,
know?
and, and you're putting your reputation on the line. That's what people don't understand too, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, yeah.
Yes.
So it's not, it's not you hand somebody off and then they'll go do whatever, right? You basically,
Yeah.
there has to be a layer of trust. And I love what you said in terms of, and listening, I agree with you, is a big watch out. Like, are they talking at you? Are they actually interested in hearing a little bit about you too? Like,
Yeah, yeah. Because, I've had people come to me and they say, "Oh my God, I appreciate," that's what I want to hear. Like, I appreciate the connection you made between me and this other person. And you see it on some of the recommendations and stuff like that. It's like, that's what it makes me feel good. It's like, I made a connection that worked, and I made some very powerful connections and brokered some relationships that are just the bomb. I'm like, I'm excited about it. I get excited when people come together and they connect and there's like synergy, like that excites me. And so, but unfortunately I've had some people who've come back to me and said, I don't know what's going on with this person. I don't feel good vibes. And I've had to, set some boundaries and limits because, like I said, my reputation is on the line, and I don't want people to kind of make me, make it seem like I'm doing something bad by referring bad people who don't have good intentions. And it's just, yeah, it's all about that. And so that's why I respect what you do, is because you understand brand, like, and I just think that's just really, really crucial and important. um and yeah, so that's how I
yeah,
would answer the question.
I, I can see that now. I can see it, and you're good at it, and it brings you joy too. Like you said, it's like
Yes,
when you
it
help
does.
somebody, yeah, you can tell. But actually, that is an interesting from a brand standpoint. Now, you said you're a connector, you're sort of the clearinghouse, facilitator, whatever you want to call it. So,
Yeah.
how do you market yourself? Because the role. Let me rephrase the question. How do you market the role in a way that shows your value, even if you're not the one delivering the service, right? Because that's sort of a balancing act.
Okay, so how do so my business is based on referrals, right?
Yeah.
And it's about referrals. So for example, I connected okay, so I met with someone on Alignable. He does like business funding or whatever, business credit repair, and I connected him to a private equity investor. And so in terms of that, I typically go into meeting people where they are, talking with them, and I do a strategic introduction. I have a system where I do a strategic introduction between two referral partners that I like and trust and know. And I put them together. And sometimes I will join the call and kind of make sure that the conversation goes well. And sometimes I trust the person so much that I don't have to join the call, and they can just handle the call and the conversation on its own. And so what happened with the business credit person and the private equity investor that I connected them to together, that led to a referral. Because what happened was that I heard the pain point that business credit person had, and they had clients that were looking for funding but didn't have a funder or didn't have that resource, and that led to a referral. And so now we're doing a rev share deal together where I get paid based on referrals that are
Yeah.
sent, and I didn't even do the referral. I didn't do the
Right.
referral.
Right.
So and then I'm also working on multi-tiered ecosystem deals where um, I'm bundling different services that people are offering in my ecosystem and putting deals together that way. And so I'm getting like different types of referrals coming into my practice, and I'm not even doing the business,
Right.
if that makes any sense. I'm just creating the connections, and the
Yeah.
referrals
Yeah.
are coming through the referral sources.
Got it. Yeah, no, no, that makes sense to me. I was just trying to see how you position yourself, but from what it sounds like to me, from a brand standpoint, what you're saying is like, go to if you have an issue, you're looking for help or an expert, go to Jonathan. He's likely to know somebody, and if Jonathan recommends them, then they're probably vetted, they're probably trustworthy, and they're probably going to deliver, right? And that's kind of what you want to stand
Yeah,
for.
because I now I'm calling it, like, because the name of my practice is Atone Therapy. I'm calling it now like the Atone Therapy experience. So it's like, if you want that experience, then, and if I've connected you, obviously it's going to be something that can carry over into a future conversation, and I don't even necessarily have to be there, because what happens is these two people, I cannot be in the room together, and they're talking about me and the connection that they had with me one to one in
Right.
that conversation. And they're like, oh, you know Jonathan, so let me figure out how to work with you because I already know that you know Jonathan. And it's like, so there's this like it's so interesting how it's happening, like, and it's growing, right? It's,
Yeah. Yeah.
because the more people I'm meeting and the more connections that are being made, I'm getting inbound referrals coming in from just people that have experiences with people that I've referred. So I'm still trying to like conceptualize what's actually happening, but it's an experience. So
Yeah.
um
You'll figure it
yeah,
out
so
though.
I'm looking forward to where it goes, and how it grows.
Well, it
So
sounds like you're enjoying it. As I said, you can tell that
yes,
you enjoy what you do, and I think
yes,
connectors are really important too,
yes.
because otherwise it's really hard to. And that's one of the things, especially for solopreneurs and entrepreneurs. It's
Hmm.
networks are everything, and I think
Right.
you're sort of helping people expand their network in a way you can't do as an individual necessarily. So
And one more thing to that is
yeah,
that you don't have to sell anything.
right,
You don't have to sell anything. All you're doing is solving problems.
right,
And the problem is that I don't even like, for most people that I've been talking to, they're like, I don't know a person that does X. Do you know a person that does that? Yeah, I know a person that does that. You need to talk to this person. Okay, cool. Then connect me to this person.
yeah,
And then that conversation leads to a conversation about the problems that they're facing in their business. But then that leads to be like, okay, then I can solve that problem. That I could bring this person to. So it's like you're not really selling anything. You're just
no,
pretty much coming together, connecting, talking about the pain points and the problems, and then now you have a solution because now you have more to talk about because you're in the room with someone that, and now it's just really about execution, and then that's it. So
but
it doesn't have to be that hard. You know what I mean? It's
what,
like,
but there is great skill involved in that, right? Because you have to listen for the right problem and
right.
then find the right person, right? That's not an easy thing to do, because if it was, everyone would do it themselves. So I think
But I
don't
think it's
sell
not
yourself
easy
short.
because it's ego. That's why it's
Yeah,
not easy because so much of our ego gets in the way of what it
true.
is that we need to do, and so that's what makes it difficult.
That is very true. Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And men have a much bigger problem with that. I've noticed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So much.
But
Yeah.
anyway, it's like you're a human Rolodex now, Jonathan. You're like a right. It's
Yes. Yeah, and I love it. I live for it. And networking doesn't have to be that complicated. I know some people tend to overcomplicate it because whether it's a personality issue or some people talk about social anxiety and all this other stuff. But I have anxiety. I do. I have anxiety, um, but when you just stick to the facts and the information, that anxiety kind of subsides because you're just meeting another human being in the
yeah,
other.
and you're
You
not
know what I
trying to
mean?
sell anything. You're not trying to pitch
No.
them. You're trying to make a
No.
connection and ascertain whether you can be of value to them and vice versa, right? So, I think
Exactly.
it's the way you do it, honestly. And
Exactly.
a lot of people sort of approach it as trying to sell, which is why it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
So
Right.
no, you're
Right.
trying to build a relationship, not close a
Yeah,
sale. So yeah,
exactly. Exactly. And so I hope that the audience really hears that because I made people you know probably struggling with this area, and it's just part of what I do is like to take out the guesswork and the fluff and all that other stuff. It really can be very simple. It's not easy, like you said. It's not easy, but it can be simple. You know.
yeah, we overcomplicate it. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, we do.
So,
Back to the ego. It's like the
yeah,
ego is overthinking, overcomplicating, overanalyzing, and it's just there is a rumination in that needs to be addressed. And sometimes we just need to take a breath and just stop and just take a step back and just stay focused on what's present versus going into that overthinking space. So now my clinical is coming in on this conversation, so that's what I talk to clients about. Yeah.
no, I
So
get that. So you talked about your anxiety, but you also mentioned to me about procrastination and perfectionism, right? Is two major
Yeah.
obstacles that
Yeah.
entrepreneurs and solopreneurs face. So I'm curious, have you encountered either of these tendencies? And if so, what strategies have helped you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, because I was talking to you about the three P's. I was talking to you about procrastination, perfectionism, and people pleasing, and those three P's have to do with control.
Yeah,
All of them. The perfectionism is really about um, it's trying to control because you want everything to be the right way, and there is no right way or wrong way, there just is. And your grip is so strong with that. And then even with people pleasing, kind of you're so focused on what other people feel and think that you're trying to control the outcome of how you're being perceived, or whether it be liked or accepted, and that's another form of control. And then the procrastination is another form of control because it's all about avoiding. You're putting things off because you may feel a bit overwhelmed, or you have so many tasks that you have to do, and it's just like, oh my god, it's just like my brain is just, especially with those who either have ADHD, or it's just so much overloading the brain. There's a bit that's an avoidance strategy, is
right.
procrastination. And I've experienced all of it. I experienced everything, because I'm not gonna sit here and lie and act like I'm like, yeah, I'm a recovering perfectionist, I'm a recovering people pleaser, and I'm a recovering procrastination. And I still challenge with that, but I realize that it is about taking a step back and observing and noticing and identifying the things that you can control and the things that you can control. Because there are things that we cannot control,
Right.
especially when it comes to business. We don't have any control over the outcome. Things that have not happened yet. We have no control over people. We have no control over the fact that we just, um, there's so many things that we have to do as a business owner and entrepreneur. And really just understanding what we can control, because we can control our thoughts, we can control our emotions, we can control the way that we react and respond to things. We have things that we can control, but we have to know what that is for ourselves. And that's what I keep telling people that I work with, is so that you can figure out how to manage your workload, manage your life, manage whatever burdens that you're carrying. And that's really all that you have. And that will reduce the procrastination, because now you're like, I'm feeling less overwhelmed, because I went from thinking about a 50 to 100 things to maybe one or two things. So my brain is not having to carry so much. So that reduces the likelihood of procrastinating, because I can be intentional about what I'm doing. Um, People pleasing, you know, I now understand it's not my responsibility to save everyone. It's not my responsibility to be liked by everyone. It's not my, job to make sure that everyone is good. It's my job to really take care of myself. That goes back to what we were saying earlier. That's my focus, right? So what are the things that I'm going to do to make sure that I like and love what I need to do for me? How can I please myself rather than please others? So that's how you can reframe that. And then what was the other one? Perfectionism is, we are so hard on ourselves. As business owners, we are just
Yeah.
so hard on ourselves. We don't give ourselves any grace or any compassion or any, because you know what happens, Nikhil, is that inner critic loves to talk to us and speak in our ear about what we're doing. We're not good enough. We're doing everything wrong. We're this, we're that. But it never tells us to say, we are enough. And it doesn't give us information to say, well, this is what we are doing. It doesn't say to us, like, here are our wins and these are our accomplishments, and this is what we've achieved historically with what we're doing. It wants us to focus on what we've done wrong. It wants to shame us. It wants to make us feel bad about ourselves, and it wants us to make us feel guilty. And so maybe it's just about the reframe of just, you know readjusting the standards that we create for ourselves, because the standards may not even be our standards. The standards may be related to something that we've learned in childhood about, or family expectations or cultural expectations or something else that has nothing to do with us, has everything to do with what we may have learned or internalized about how we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to show up. So that's how you address perfectionism is, is to relax the expectations and the standards that we place upon ourselves, the critic and all these other external voices that tell us that we're this and this and that, So those are just some of the things that I try to educate people on, and how to navigate those three P's in a way that can help you to stay stable and grounded and in your body.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I know I talked a lot about that, but this is kind of how I hit on all these different just these different areas.
Yeah, it's important because honestly, everyone, we all deal with that, right? I mean, it's like
Right.
I don't think I think either you're lying to yourself if you say you don't, or you're a sociopath, right? I don't know any other way that this works. So,
Yes.
honestly, that's what in my 50 years of wisdom, that's the conclusion I've reached. Um,
Mhm.
so the one other thing I want to touch on is the loneliness of solopreneurship. Right? You talked about isolation earlier on.
Yeah.
So how have you found your community and how have you built a support system?
I think it was very challenging at first because I do suffer from, and I'm being very transparent on this podcast, by the way. You know what? Because I just turned 41, and I'm just like, blah, 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 blah. I'm just really excited just to be here. But the loneliness, it is an epidemic, and it is something that I've experienced, and it does have to do with just being in spaces where you're just. I think for me, historically, I've been that only one. I've been
Yeah,
the only one in the space, and that can feel alienating and can feel isolating and can feel lonely because you don't really have people that you can turn to that relate to what it is that you're talking about. So I think part of the loneliness is just to acknowledge that there's nothing wrong with being lonely, and there was nothing wrong with me with feeling lonely. So I had to take the shame away from it, um, and then once I acknowledged it, I was able to say, okay, what's triggering the loneliness? Is it because I'm in environments where I don't feel safe, or I don't feel heard or seen or visible? Or am I having conversations with people where, that feeling of loneliness is very pervasive? And so I had to set some boundaries for myself to really step back and detach and disengage from those things that make me feel lonely. And then what that did for me was to help me to kind of go inward and to understand what was it that I needed to feel more connected. Because the opposite of loneliness is connection, really.
right.
To be
Yeah,
connected, to be in communion or community with yourself and others. And for me, I began to speak up more, because I was harboring and suppressing feelings and thoughts and emotions that I just needed to let it just set. Like, the reason why I'm lonely is because my voice is being silenced, it's being marginalized, it's being minimized. And so I need to be around people who get me, who respect me, who value me. And I just began to talk to people and notice and observe how they reacted and responded to what it is that I was saying. And some people were very judgmental and critical and condemning. I'm not going to say who they were, but just that energy, but just that's that feeling that comes up to, like, I don't, when I speak up, do I feel like I'm being gaslit or invalidated? Or when I speak up, does it feel like I am being heard, or someone's just like, yeah, I get what you're coming from because this is what I experienced, or this is what I'm experiencing. And I think that that's where community can be formed when you
yeah,
begin to really start expressing yourself more to people, that and you just be more, you don't have to tell everybody all your business, but just talk to people about what you're experiencing and going through. And it may invite some people to kind of listen to you, and they can say, oh, okay, I share that struggle too. And they can tell you, more about what they're going through and their story and their experiences. And now you got a friend. Now you got someone that you can be in community with. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a million people. It could be one or two or three, and now you got a community. And so that's what happened to me when I stopped, you know, when I stopped being around people that just misunderstood me and didn't really get where I was coming from, because that's what contributed to the loneliness, to be in a space where, there are people that get it and understand, and I don't have to explain it to people. I don't have to like educate people about what it is that I'm going through. And so that's what led to individual connections. That's what led to invites to other groups that were more aligned and like-minded. And it started to reduce the loneliness a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I don't, so that's kind of what helped me with it. And, I encourage those who are listening to try to do that, like to try to find, you know, you don't have, like I said, you don't have to tell it all, but just share a little bit about yourself and see how people react and respond to what that is,
Yeah.
and see if that's a good, test.
Yeah, no, I love that. And thank you for sharing it. And also you're on the right podcast. We're Unfiltered Solopreneur. So it's a good place to share these feelings. But I love what you said in terms of you have to be real, right? If you have to be someone else around people, then they're not your people. So
Right.
and I will say you're welcome to the Boost Solo community, right? So we welcome you with open arms.
I love it.
We're
I
all
love it.
family here.
Yes,
So now let
absolutely.
me ask you, if you could offer one piece of advice to someone wanting to start their solopreneur journey, what would you tell them?
Start. Just start. Just do it. You know, I what I keep, because I'm mentoring some people who are, the part of this work is mentoring, but I am mentoring people who are so afraid to make mistakes and just starting. And it's just like, just do it. Like, what have you got to lose? There's no one, do the podcast, do it scared, do it, and there's nothing that's going to happen if you start. Nothing is going to happen. All is going to happen is, you know, you're just going to start. I mean, and so that's the advice that I would say, because there's a lot of people that are out there that really want to get into it, but they've been burned, they've been scorned, they got all this other stuff going on, and it's just like it's adding another thing to the list of things to do. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something big. It could just be maybe, and this might be controversial, but I'm like, go to ChatGPT and just start talking to ChatGPT just for a second. And maybe it could be about, your business idea or something like that. If you're concerned about privacy, confidentiality, just try to find a tool that, you don't have to put your personal info in there, but just see what it says. And, I just want people to start. That's
Yeah.
all. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of people that just won't even start. Or they just feel like it's just they're not enough, or they need to do all these different things. And I think the culture of entrepreneurship has you thinking, when you go to LinkedIn and when you look at the social media and things like that, you got to do all these different things and these bells and whistles, and you gotta hire this person and the website and all this other stuff. And it's like, no, you just
Yeah.
have to, you just got to start from, because you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. And
You
we
know what I
all
mean?
start there, right? We all start
Yeah.
there. And
Mhm.
it's interesting. It goes back to what you were just saying a minute ago, because to me, it's like, the perfectionism, the procrastination, and the people pleasing.
Yeah.
That's where you get stuck, right? Because you're like, oh, I have to just do this one more thing. Then I'll be like, or it has to be perfect before I start. Or it's like, what will people think if I fail, right? So,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
most of our
Right.
things come back to those three P's, right? But I agree with you. And there's never a good time. There's no such
It's
thing as the
never a good
good time
time.
to start other than right now. So that's the other
Exactly.
thing. Yeah.
And one more thing to what you're saying is that um the core of what I do is freedom.
Hmm.
This is why I'm doing it. It's about freedom. Do you want to be free? So many people have given their entire lives to this job, to this 9 to 5, to these roles, to these systems that have left them feeling energetically depleted and drained. And it's just exhausting. And so part of my work is really about giving people permission to reclaim their time and their energy and their voice back. I really want people to stop surviving
Right.
and start designing their life that reflects who they really are. And I always say to my clients, I'm like, you will meet the version of yourself that you've never met before at some point. You will. If
Yeah.
we work together, yeah, you will. You're gonna meet that version, and you're gonna leave that version of yourself that was stuck in that. I also talk about the fog in my work, which is the acronym stands for fear, obligation, and guilt, because so many of us are in that fog.
Yeah.
But when you're out of that fog, it's gonna be a new day. It's gonna be a new day.
And that person is already in there, right?
That
They're
person
already
isn't
there.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
they're
just
already
like too scared
there.
to let them out. Yeah, I know. I'm
Yeah,
with you. Yeah, it takes a
that's
little
it.
bit of courage, but anything worth doing, anything that's worthwhile, takes a little
Right.
bit of. I always say, if you don't feel a little fear, you're not doing, you're not doing the right things.
Just a
Because
little.
otherwise, and also my other thing is, like, I always felt like I would rather mess up completely and stumble or fail than wake up one day lying on my deathbed and regret not having done X, Y, and Z, right? So I mean, that to me is a bigger shame than, than actually, and, look at everybody who's succeeded. I mean, Steve Jobs had more failures than he had successes. Who remembers those? Nobody. Anyway, so, but yeah, I'm with you. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered, Jonathan?
Feel free. I mean, reach out and know that, you're not alone and there is support. Because that's what I tell everybody. You're not alone. There's support. You're not the only person dealing with this stuff. You're not.
No.
So,
And that's really the point of this podcast, right? Is to share the fact that there are many. But I always say we may feel like one, but we are many, right?
right.
Yeah, but I agree with you. So yeah, there are a lot of communities out there now for solopreneurs like this one, but you can find another one too. But I think it's important to find your tribe, find that community, because none of us can do this on our own, and none of us need to do this on our own. So
No, no, there's plenty of resources that are at your fingertips. There's resources and just, start, get engaged, like be involved, get in the community, do something.
yeah, I agree.
So that's what I would
Well,
say.
that's a good way to get to our rapid fire round. So I'm just going to throw a couple of
Okay.
questions at you and give
Okay.
us what comes to your mind. So, what's
Okay.
a mindset myth you'd like to ban forever?
Oh, mindset myths that I would like to ban forever. Um, there's no such thing as being perfect.
Yeah,
I guess that's a mindset myth.
it is.
There's
And
no
it's
such thing as
also,
perfection.
yeah, hallelujah. Complete this sentence. Most solopreneurs underestimate the importance of.
Their mindset.
Touche. What's a non business skill that's made you better at business?
Um, being empathetic, empathy.
Yeah, much
It's not
needed.
business. Yeah,
Much needed
empathy.
in the business
Mhm.
world. What's one money belief you used to have that you've now ditched?
Money belief that money is evil. It's not.
No,
It's not evil.
it's not good or evil, right? It's just,
No, it's not good or bad. It's just money.
yeah, exactly. So, going back to limit, if you could eliminate one limiting belief for every solopreneur, what would you eradicate or get rid of?
Okay. The self-limiting belief is that you need to have a lot of money in order to start a business.
No, you
That's
don't.
not true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true. Man, that's a great note to end on. You don't even actually need a website to start. I started
You
without a
don't even need a
website.
website.
Yeah. But
I started my business on one client and then it became a business. Bam.
exactly. Yeah. I'm with you anyway, but it's been so much fun chatting with you. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for, talking about everything that you did and all the topics you covered. Thank you again.
Thank you. And thank you for listening.
Jonathan's journey isn't a linear pivot, it's a layered transformation. From burnout and identity loss to clarity and alignment, his journey reminds us that your business doesn't just need strategy, it needs healing too. Here are my key takeaways. Burnout can be a catalyst for clarity. Jonathan's experience with burnout and the disconnect he felt in his work pushed him towards self care and a more autonomous path. Solopreneurs, sometimes the hardest moments give us the clearest signals. Pay attention to what no longer serves you. Fixing your back end isn't just operational, it's emotional. Jonathan sees what many solopreneurs miss. Disorganization isn't just inefficiency, it's often tied to shame, avoidance, and old survival strategies. Remember, messy systems usually reflect messy beliefs. Don't just fix the tools, ask what you're avoiding. Address the foundation, not just the facade. Jonathan talks about solopreneurs who are magnetic on the surface, strong brand, high energy, but cannot sustain growth because the back end is hollow. Build your scaffolding before the spotlight. A great brand can't compensate for a broken system. Connection, not control. Jonathan reframes the three P's: perfectionism, procrastination, and people pleasing, not as flaws, but as coping strategies rooted in control. Your real power comes when you stop performing and start being present. You don't need to be perfect, you need to be real. Gatekeeping isn't bad, it's boundaries. Jonathan's ecosystem is built on trust, not volume. He doesn't connect people just to connect, he curates with care. Your network reflects your brand and your values. Protect your energy and your audience. Not everyone earns access. Jonathan reminds us real business strength starts from within, through self awareness, honest relationships, and the courage to design life on your own terms. Thanks for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If you got value from today's episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another solopreneur who needs this message. Until next time, keep breaking free from the corporate grind. And remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.